Tonight, Chinese troops seen at the Myanmar border. A shocking new video emerges of security forces kicking 10 blindfolded and tied up men in the middle of the street. The situation continuing to worsen as we go to air. It's Sunday, the 11th of April. You're watching 6 News also tonight.
It's basically what I was doing anonymously before, but never as Q.
That slip up making headlines tonight because the man you just saw, Ron Watkins, may be Q, the supposed secret government operative behind QAnon. We'll explain how this all affects the pro-Trump conspiracy theory, and the fallout from Georgia's new voting law continues. Companies boycotting the state and people boycotting those companies. We'll fact check how it really affects Georgians as the former president weighs in.
I don't think anybody cares, but they shouldn't be doing that. They shouldn't be hurting the people of Georgia. They shouldn't be doing that, especially for a bill that is less stringent than the one they have where they're moving the All-Star game to.
Good evening. The eyes of the world are on Myanmar tonight, with no end in sight to the terror and bloodshed that's riven the military-controlled country. As the death toll approaches 600, ethnic minorities are reportedly planning a rebellion amid mounting calls for a new army to overthrow the junta. Right now, Chinese troops have been seen at the country's border near the township of Musei amid growing rumours about involvement from Beijing and the Communist Party. We'll be getting to that a little later. The call for action now extending overseas. Leaders from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations are set to meet in Jakarta. Myanmar will of course be high on the agenda as countries scramble and squabble over how to best manage the developing situation. Chief Reporter Connor Forke has the very latest.
The military junta's crackdown on dissent continues in Myanmar. Some estimates now put the death toll at over 600, and as the coup persists, the focus has turned to action from both in and outside the country. Insurgent groups and ethnic parties have been put under increased pressure to act bravely and decisively. Several protesters have fought back with guns, knives and firebombs amid growing calls for a new army to overthrow the junta. That makes conditions ripe for civil war, according to international foreign ministers, the UN and rebel leaders inside the troubled country. Now 8,500 kilometres away in the heart of London, what this man describes as a kind of coup. He's Myanmar's ambassador to London, locked out of the embassy, reportedly by his deputy, who's now taken charge on behalf of the military.
Mr. Ambassador, could you just tell us what happened? Please, it's very important to tell the world.
Coup, you understand that it's kind of coup. In the middle of London, this kind of coup is not going to happen.
The extraordinary action came after he called for the release of Aung San Suu Kyi, the country's detained civilian leader. Now it's extraordinary because it means that even those as far away as London are not exempt from this crackdown on dissent, and neither are Myanmar's celebrities. Wanted lists have been published on state TV, with warrants issued for the arrest of 120 influencers, entertainers, artists and musicians. According to one advocacy group, the military has detained nearly 3,000 people, many of them protesters. Now, protesters, in their latest show of defiance, have burnt copies of the 2008 Constitution, as well as the Chinese and Russian flags. Photos of China's President Xi Jinping have not been spared from the flames. To explain why, let's take a listen to Myanmar's envoy to the UN, who spoke to CNN.
Russia and China can make just one phone call to these military generals who are terrorizing 54 million people of Myanmar. If they don't like to stop these military generals killing the people of Myanmar, Russia and China risk future political suicide, relationship suicide. People of Myanmar will never forget what they have done today.
China, which borders Myanmar, and Russia have close ties to the junta. Protesters have been critical of Russia and China's perceived support for the military government and their interference in the UN's efforts to quell the situation. Their dissatisfaction indicated by these masks and a three-finger salute. So given their close ties with the junta, it's not surprising then that Russia has warned against imposing sanctions, saying they may only exacerbate conflict. That's despite the EU stepping up sanctions amid calls for wider international action.
We need tougher sanctions, coordinated sanctions, targeted sanctions against the military regime. How many dead bodies is necessary for international community to take strong action against the military regime? If the world refuses to stop these military generals, then my country is going to face the greatest civil war that we have never seen before.
Leaders from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations are set to meet in Jakarta to discuss the situation in Myanmar. A question mark remains over when. Now, I want to leave you with this footage showing what appears to be members of the military dancing. The video receiving widespread condemnation on social media, many describing them as heartless. A group representing the deposed government says it's collected 180,000 pieces of evidence of rights abuses by the junta.
Connor, 4K reporting there, and right now I want to get to some newly published footage on the China-Myanmar border. Chinese troops are being seen near the township of Musei, which ends up connecting to the Yunnan province in China. But despite growing rumours online, the official word from Beijing was that they were there to quote-unquote protect gas and oil pipelines, but still we've been hearing reports of Chinese involvement in that deadly crackdown on the streets of Myanmar for months now. And we've also seen some pretty shocking videos when it comes to what security forces are actually doing. At least 10 civilians you can see there have been blindfolded, their hands tied behind their back by these forces who are being called terrorists by many protesters. Here's some of what's being recorded. I do warn you, it is distressing, but these tactics of military and police is really under fire right now in Myanmar, and we will of course continue to monitor this story 24/7 on our social media pages and at 6newsau.com. And just a reminder, if you would like to know how the Myanmar coup began and learn more about the country's history of military violence, head to our YouTube channel and don't forget to subscribe. You can see the full report there. Changing pace now, Australia's vaccine rollout is again under fire tonight after major breakdowns in the supply chain were revealed. Scott Morrison initially said more than 3 million doses of the AstraZeneca jab have been blocked from importation. The federal government remains on the defensive, deflecting blame to the European Union, which has also denied responsibility for blocking the shipment. Those 3.1 million doses have not arrived because AstraZeneca hasn't requested approval to export the doses outside of Europe, believing it would be knocked back. It's the latest quarrel in a long-running fractious relationship between Canberra and the EU after 250,000 doses were blocked last month. The revelations come as researchers at the University of Queensland make plans to rework their vaccine, which was unceremoniously dumped by the federal government last year after trial participants returned false positives for HIV. That's despite preliminary data showing the UQ vaccine would have worked better on the elderly, only requiring a single dose and didn't need to be stored at such cold temperatures. And it all comes after a senior official at the European Medicines Agency confirmed there is a link between the AstraZeneca vaccine and extremely rare cases of blood clots reported in people who recently had the jab. COVID-19 cases in India have risen 13-fold in 2 months, meaning it now has the world's highest growth rate of cases. India's worsening second wave has piled pressure on the government to expand its vaccination rollout, which is currently restricted to frontline workers and those over 45. Despite being one of the world's largest producers of the COVID-19 vaccines, several states in India have also flagged shortages. The government also stopping short of a nationwide lockdown, citing the devastating economic toll of its last one back in 2020. 13,000 kilometres away, the UK is set to roll back its strict lockdown measures after 3 months. Schools and non-essential businesses will reopen. The vaccine passport system will also be trialled for large events and travelling abroad.
So it appears we have some major audio issues with Leo in Melbourne there. I'm Connor R4K in Brisbane, and the show must go on, so let's continue. Who is Q, the supposed secret government operative and prophet of QAnon, whose identity has long been shrouded in mystery? Tonight we may have an answer, thanks to the new HBO documentary, Q Into the Storm. Ron Watkins is speculated to be the father of the far-right conspiracy, which implores its devotees to follow the plan, an unfounded theory that says Donald Trump is waging a war against a cabal of Satan-worshipping pedophiles in the mainstream media and the Democratic Party. The creator of the documentary series says a slip-up made by Watkins during the interview constitutes an admission. Here's a snippet of that interview where Watkins talks about the fact that he shared voter fraud conspiracies following Trump's election loss.
It's basically what I was doing anonymously before, but never as Q.
He had just gotten away with it for so long, he wasn't really watching his words. And you can see in the clip that you just played, he actually breaks into a smile before before I do, because he realized, I think, what had just happened. Ron Watkins has all of the motive, right? He's interested in quote unquote red pilling the masses, which is kind of getting his worldview out to people. He doesn't like the mainstream media, and he was trying to build an audience. And I think to some extent, he and his father are also are kind of interested in taking over the world. So, it checks out.
This Twitter user echoed a prevailing sentiment, lampooning Watkins for the dangerous cult-like nature of QAnon, specifically for the conspiracy's role in, quote, ruining relationships and causing followers to believe insane conspiracy nonsense and basing their entire identity on it. Well, if you've been watching Channel 9 recently, you probably would have seen a few technical difficulties. As you may know, 2 weeks ago a cyber attack stopped all live programming from Sydney and forced all production on Australia's most watched network down to Melbourne. Tonight we can reveal new details about the hack and when you can expect to see some of your favourite programs back on air. Lincoln Holmes has the story.
Australia's biggest network goes off air. Channel 9 right now is still dealing with the effects of a major cyber attack 2 weeks ago, which forced a number of programs to move production down to Melbourne, while others were completely taken off air. Staff in Sydney forced to work from home, others relocated interstate, the move impacting TV, online and print services. On Sunday morning, Nine's Richard Wilkins tweeted that they were experiencing tech issues preventing the Weekend Today show from airing. Within hours, reports emerged that Russia may have been behind the attack over an upcoming report, though Nine stayed silent on the exact details. Nine's Alicia Loxley soon updated viewers on the situation, confirming what many already knew.
Cyber hackers have targeted Channel 9 in a massive ransomware attack, bringing down its network Australia-wide. No one has claimed responsibility for the bug, but IT experts are working to bring systems back online.
A joint 6 p.m. bulletin was later put to air, shown in both Melbourne and Sydney, but since then everyone at the network has had to adapt. On TV's Nine's morning news and late news bulletins were taken off air, along with separate local news bulletins in Victoria, New South Wales, the ACT and Queensland. 9.com, 9news.com and 9Now were also impacted, along with the Current Affair, which has pre-recorded, as well as the printing of Monday's Sydney Herald Sun, the story making headlines in the UK and New Zealand.
Australia's Channel 9 has admitted cyber hackers forced its Sunday morning programming in its 5 p.m. Melbourne news bulletin off the air yesterday.
This is the place which is scrambling to get its act together after a major cyber attack.
6 News can reveal that programs will likely still be produced and switched in Melbourne for at least the next 2 weeks, and the network's news and the Current Affair department will still remain affected. Until then, though, Channel 9 will continue to investigate the hack and others will make fun of it.
평양시 1만 세대 살림집 건설 착공식이 진행됐습니다.
The corrupt Russian government of drug, slavery and bomb companies is proud to announce our takeover of the 9 network.
Lincoln Holmes, 6 News.
A Filipino man has died after allegedly being forced by village guards to perform an exercise hundreds of times as a punishment for violating coronavirus restrictions. The Guardian reports that the 28-year-old was caught buying water after 6 p.m, apparently in violation of the city's COVID curfew, and as a punishment was forced to do 300 squats. But the man's partner wrote in a Facebook page that as a result he struggled to walk, began having seizures, and died. Now, despite the police chief insisting that there were no such punishments for people who violated restrictions, the city's mayor has confirmed that an investigation is underway, saying that he hopes there will be an immediate clarity on the events and peace of mind will be given to the man's family. The Philippines has reported more than 795,000 cases since the pandemic began, including over 13,000 deaths, the highest totals in Southeast Asia after Indonesia. The chilling note left by a Texas teenager before he and his older brother killed their entire family in a gruesome murder-suicide has been revealed. 19-year-old Farhan Tawid posted a Google Doc link to his Instagram account detailing his struggle with serious depression and explaining why he did what he did. In it, he called the US's gun control measures a joke and wrote about how easy it was for his brother to purchase the guns, noting that he simply lied about suffering from a mental illness. The note ended with the line, "I love my family, I genuinely do, and that's exactly why I decided to kill them." 6 family members were found dead in Allen, Texas earlier this week after the apparent murder-suicide, neighbors saying they were stunned by what happened. And if you or anyone you know needs help, you can contact Lifeline at 1311 14. Let's now return to Leonardo Puglisi live in Melbourne with the rest of tonight's bulletin. Leo, have we got you?
Yeah, hopefully you and everyone at home can hear me alright. We're having a bit of trouble with our microphone here in studio. Sounds like it's fixed now. Appreciate you helping us out and quickly taking over there. And of course, you've been busy covering Myanmar. Connor Forke live for us in Brisbane tonight. Thank you. Alright, well, meanwhile, the fallout from Georgia's new voting law is continuing tonight, with a number of big-name brands boycotting the state entirely, but now those in support of the rules are performing a boycott of their own, with even the 45th President, Donald Trump, weighing in. Take a look.
I don't think anybody cares, but they shouldn't be doing that. They shouldn't be hurting the people of Georgia. They shouldn't be doing that, especially for a bill that is less stringent than the one they have where they're moving the All-Star game to. In this new law, I don't believe they have signature matching. Now, why wouldn't they have signature matching? A lot of the real power, a lot of the guts have been taken out of it. They had something that was very powerful, meaning fair and free and good for the people, but it was strong. You have to be a citizen. You have to be all of the things that you have to be, and signature ID, etc., etc.
So clearly a lot of division coming from this law. Let's bring in our US correspondent Jackson Gosnell live for us tonight in South Carolina. Jackson, take us through some of the more controversial elements of this law.
Well, Leo, we're monitoring many stories here in the U.S., including the Georgia voting law. As you may recall, the Georgia governor signed a new voting law into effect. Now, that voting law has some very interesting elements to it, and that is why many Democratic lawmakers are opposed to it. President Biden called this new voting law something that was like in the Jim Crow era, he said. And also, we're learning that many businesses are pulling out from doing business in Georgia in response to this law. Now, the law states that no third party can serve food or drink while people are waiting in line. It requires multiple forms of ID in some cases. It also limits hours of vote drop box locations, which were previously opened for extended periods of time. Now, people on the left say that this is voter suppression and that this should not happen. People on the right think that this law is wonderful. They think that it ensures there is security within America's voting system. So that's where we are, and many government officials are urging people who do business in Georgia to halt any type of business that they're doing in Georgia. Now, Apple CEO Tim Cook responded to all of this, and he says that he wants people to be able to vote with their iPhone. He says that your iPhone stores information about your life, and that in many cases, people have more information on their electronics than they do in their physical home. So he says it just makes sense. A lot of people really disagreeing with that, though, because the voting system has always been done in a very low-tech manner, and people say it should continue to be done that way because of security reasons and the potential for hacking into various systems. We already do have voter interference from a lot of other countries, election interference, I should say. So a lot going on here in response to voting, even though we're kind of far from another presidential election. I'll continue to monitor things from here in the U.S. I'm Jackson Gosnell. Back to you.
Right, Jackson Gosnell live for us tonight, thank you. And right now we just want to fact check a few claims made about the voting law. President Joe Biden's claim that polls close at 5 p.m. is false. Voting hours remain between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. That's what the law allows. Also, while there will be fewer drop boxes, you have to remember that they weren't even used before the pandemic. And one of the most controversial claims you've probably seen is that people are banned from giving water to voters waiting in line. Now, although poll workers are still allowed to do that, other people who may be on a particular side of the political spectrum are restricted. So if they are in 150 feet of a polling place or within 25 feet of any voter, that is not allowed. Republicans say that move limits political interference. And of course, if you need something fact-checked, simply tag or DM us on social media. Just search 6 News AU to find us. Well, in case you missed it, Liberal Senator Jim Molan has announced he has an aggressive form of cancer and will be stepping away from parliamentary duties while he undergoes further medical tests and treatment. But while most comments about it were messages of support, there were some that were quite the opposite. Joining me now to discuss this and more is investigative journalist Tom Ravlic. Tom, good to see you. How are you tonight?
Leo, absolutely wonderful.
That's good. So obviously Senator Molan opened up about his cancer diagnosis on Monday, but while most of the comments about it were simply messages of support, there were some people who were quite the opposite, labelling it things like karma. What's your reaction?
I think it's unfortunate that people do go down several notches in their response to situations like this. I understand fully that within our political system, there are different views about what people have done in their careers, but there are moments where you can hit the pause button on negativity or rhetoric of that kind, and just stop a moment. I think sometimes silence is better than going down a route of a cheap hit on Twitter.
Now, the reason a lot of people were saying things like that were all based on some very serious allegations of war crimes during Senator Molan's time serving in Iraq. Of course, he's denied everything, but regardless, is that really karma in your view?
I think people will need to be careful when they're engaged in that sort of public discourse, particularly at a time when somebody has been so public about a fairly serious medical diagnosis. I understand that there are people who have particular views about military action, but you've got to be very careful when you have these discussions, particularly at a time when someone's been upfront about a medical diagnosis. I think you can dissect the military activity of Australia in various jurisdictions over the years as you can the military activity by the US, but I don't think it was, the best time for some people to engage in that space. But it's Twitter. You see almost anything on Twitter these days, and you've really got to be prepared for some of the worst.
But on a different subject, just quickly because we're running out of time here, you've been covering the rise of the far right in your works, especially online. Now, neo-Nazi Thomas Sewell, who was recently charged with that attack on a Channel 9 security guard, his Telegram account has been gaining followers recently. Tell me about that.
Okay, over the past month and a half, what we've reported in Crikey, which is a publication obviously online and one to which I've contributed from time to time, there's been an increase in his following. At one stage he was sitting around about 3,800, 4,000 odd. He's now gone well into the 10,000 plus category. What that demonstrates, Leo, is that there are times when publicity is given to groups or individuals, and there's a peak of an interest in what they do and what they say. There are people like Christina Keneally, the senator who's also on the Parliamentary Committee on Intelligence and Security, who's looking at issues to do with extremism and radicalisation. A lot of concerns exist about radicalisation and extremism online and how that occurs. I think you'll see some of that play out when the Parliamentary Committee sits down, holds its public hearings, and eventually issues a public report.
All right, we'll leave it there. Tom Ravlic, thanks for joining us tonight.
Absolute pleasure.
All right, well, taking a look at some of the other top stories we're following tonight, Kim Jong-un has admitted that North Korea is facing its worst ever situation while addressing thousands of members of his ruling party during a major political conference in Pyongyang. The North Korean leader was quoted by state media as criticising the party's grassroots units for unspecified shortcomings that the country needs to overcome, and it comes as Kim continues to reject the Biden administration's calls for talks between the two nations and follows North Korea dropping out of this year's Tokyo Olympics. Meanwhile, Chinese TV channels have been spotted blurring out a number of well-known brand logos during their programs in an apparent show of support for the country's Xinjiang cotton campaign. Western retailers are right now facing a backlash in China after they expressed concern over the alleged use of Uyghur forced labour in cotton production, which Beijing denies. But now, shoes and t-shirts of dozens of people have been completely censored on air, many mocking the video editors and also pointing out it's not the first time this has happened. Tattoos, earring and even hip-hop culture has all been blurred out in the past, and police in Texas have taken one person into custody after a suspect jumped behind the wheel of a stolen Dallas Fire Department ambulance. The emergency vehicle was taken from a fire station and driven down a busy highway. It wasn't until the suspect bottomed out on a curb in a residential neighbourhood that the ambulance came to a stop. WFAA TV reports that the exact same ambulance was actually stolen once before, ending up in Louisiana. Alright, well now here's Ivan and Kit with what's coming up later tonight on WAMN News.
Thanks, Leo. Coming up on WAMN News, a grieving family plans to sue the WA government for negligence after their son was hit by a train. An exclusive report.
WA hospital crisis deepens as Health Minister denies cuts were made to Midland Public Hospital.
A major cyclone is set to hit Western Australia as travellers are urged to return home immediately.
Brad Pettit presents his intentions as the only Greens member in WA, plus Dr Andrew Miller's comment. Join us after 8:30 p.m. East Coast time on the WAMN News Facebook page or YouTube channel.
Alright, thanks to both Ivan and Kit there. Now to tomorrow's forecast right across the country. For tomorrow now, Brisbane cloudy, a top of 23, 18 in Sydney, starting the day at just 2 degrees in Canberra, getting up to 17 later in the day, 17 in Melbourne, also 17 in Hobart. Winter seems to be coming a bit early on the east coast, warming up in the rest of the country though, 21 in Adelaide, 27 in Alice Springs, 22 in rain in Perth, and in Darwin, heavy rain, a warm top of 33. And finally tonight, some sad news. After over a decade, a piece of internet history will be closing very soon. Yahoo Answers announcing they'll be shutting down on May the 4th. The site has been home to many weird questions and answers. Here's a look at the site right now, if we can bring that up for you. There we go. You've got the message about it shut down at the top. Then we've got a few interesting questions. Is Yahoo Answers shutting down because conservatives have exposed the socialist takeover of America? Will America survive 4 years of Joe Biden? Why are conservatives so triggered, in all caps there, by MLB moving their all-star game from Atlanta? Is Donald Trump in denial? Should Trump buy Yahoo immediately to prevent Answers from being shut down? And is Yahoo Answers being shut down to silence conservatives? Well, you may think some of those questions are funny. We thought we should bring up some of the best and the worst of Yahoo Answers over the years. We've got how is Babby formed? How girl get pregnant? All spelt that way. We've got my girlfriend is pregnant and we didn't have sex. How could this have happened? So keeping with the pregnancy theme there. Will my laptop get heavier if I put more files on it? Why do black people call each other Monica? You can probably guess what they're joking about there. I hope they're joking. If you die in Canada, do you die in real life? How do I unbake a cake? What is the name of the song that goes dum 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 dum? That, of course, being Seven Nation Army. And finally, a question that'll probably make you overthink a bit too much. Should I attend my boyfriend's wedding? Again, the final date you can write questions and answers on Yahoo Answers is May the 4th. And that is 6 News for this very busy Sunday evening. You can start the day with the latest headlines by heading to our website, 6newsau.com, and by following us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Lit. Just search 6 News AU to find us. I'm Leonardo Puglisi. Thanks for your company. Good night.